I'm leaving at 11 o'clock.
No, we're just gonna pay
Alright.
the bill.
Just pay their whole bill?
Yeah.
All right, guys, we're gonna call the meeting to order. It is Thursday, August 23rd at around 10:30. Please speak into your mics. Terry is not here keeping minutes. Brian, feel free to activate that mic for yourself so she can do minutes. Present this morning, Richard Hussey, Peter Kaiser, myself, Stephen Welch, Peter McEachern, and Jason Bridges. And we have our DPW director, Mr. Robert McNeil, here to speak in a bit. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
All right. Excellent, that carries unanimously, there being no no's. Public comment, there is no members of the public here to comment for the record. Motion to review, to approve the minutes of August 9th.
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Okay, there being no dissent, that carries unanimously. We will hold the, Rebecca, just so you're aware, Terry has some revisions to the 16th. And I noticed something else, I'll just send it to her today for the next one. And thank you for getting this all together for us, by the way. So we're going to jump into our review, overview and discussion of the DPW solid waste capital request for fiscal year 20 and out years. And just to keep things moving along, we're looking at the current year requests, and then we can do discussion on those topics, and then the out year request and discussion. And then we'll cut Mr. McNeil free, and we can have our committee discussion, and he's welcome to stay. With that, Rob, the floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back. So I would preface this discussion on, we are in continuing talks with our folks at Waste Options to develop the fiscal 20 and beyond solid waste enterprise fund capital needs. In that, what you see before you on the completed sheets is based on the preliminary discussions we've had with them. We have proceeded with the fiscal 19 project for the new baler for the materials recovery facility. So that's underway. The materials, or at least the order is in, and I know we've been making some interim payments on that. So that's expected to happen early in 19. Mining is continuing, and I would say some of the bigger ticket items here that are involved, including mining and capping of specific cells, which are integral to these discussions, are, depending on your perspective, are largely up in the air. You know, there's what the permits require us to do and what is still being discussed as far as an approach for the long-term future of the facility, not just beyond the 2025 contract that we have with Waste Options, but it's about what the community wants our landfill facility to do for it for the future. So those things have some real ramifications, clearly, depending on timing and depending on how much money we're looking to outlay. If the mining continues, it's expected to continue at a rate that it has been, roughly the 700 to 800,000 projected annually. However, the current permit doesn't allow us to continue to mine beyond this fiscal year. And so under the current permit, it triggers capping the original unlined cell, which I think we were carrying 8.2 last year. We've been kicking around 10 internally, and I would say in my most recent meeting with Waste Options, they had quoted me 14. And so where that number lies and what it really means is yet to be determined, but a fluctuation from 8.2 to 14 is more than I care to project. So we have signed a contract with Weston and Sampson, who's been representing us through the construction of the most recent cell, cell 3A. They are on board to do some cost estimating for closure costs. And so I think that'll be helpful, but that's a contract that has just been signed. It was just approved last night by the board. So I would say right now, we still need to carry a number for the capping of the cells. We still have mining that's happening in fiscal 19, but until we have a better understanding of the direction, a combination of the direction the town would like to go in and frankly what the regulators are going to allow us to do, the capping and mining numbers are going to be in question.
Mm-hmm. What's a timetable for decisions?
So from the regulators, the plan is to be meeting with regulators September, October timeframe to sit down and talk about, the what-if scenarios. And beyond that, if we were to move forward with a request to continue to mine and project out the capping further, we would have to modify the plans that we currently have.
So if we decide not to mine, what does that trigger?
Well, it's not a decision that we have to make. Let's say this. Right now, DEP has said the mining will end in fiscal 19, and then you will begin to cap. So that's sort of been laid out here.
Mm-hmm.
Other than sort of the caveat is if the mining were to be allowed to continue, there's some out-year placeholders for that.
Mm-hmm.
If the town says, no, we absolutely want to continue to mine, then it's a mother may I. It's not a done deal. If we just say, hey, we want to continue to mine, that's not a done deal. And in fact, we've been told it's a very slim chance that would be allowed.
Slim chance to
Very
mine?
slim. Yeah,
To
very.
continue mining?
That's right.
So what are the ramifications of that?
Then we would have to finish mining this year and go immediately into capping.
And where does the garbage go?
Well, no, so it's not, this is only limited to the original unlined landfill cell.
Okay.
We have active cells, and we have a cell that's under
Okay.
construction with additional space to expand into the future. It's not, you're right to be concerned, because with limited space at that facility and stopping the mining and capping what's, to be capped, you're essentially losing that space forever for use of further landfilling.
So when do we run out of space?
It's a great question. Yeah, it's well down the road, but it will come to fruition at some point.
How do we get that answer? Because that for me is
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we could, that's, if we just stick with modern, current technology, we can project out, a realistic expectation for that. A lot of the site right now is being used as storage of the mined reusable soils. But the permit that we currently have allows us to only stockpile that for then use to cap, be part of the capping material for the landfill itself. So it's intended to keep the costs of capping the landfill down, and as opposed to exporting that material to be used elsewhere. So
So-
that's taking up a lot of space.
So would it be when you get that number, how many years out we can continue to do what we do out there? Is there a way to extend that by, I'm going to throw a hand grenade in there. Is there a way to extend that if we took the existing DPW site where you have your buildings and maintenance facility? Can we use that parcel of land in conjunction with the landfill?
I would say anything's possible. And that discussion would have to be had with the regulators, to understand.
So it
truly.
seems to me from a really looking out number of years that what we'd want to do is make sure, can we or can we not use that land? And if we can, and does it make sense at this point in time to think about our facility? Is that the best place for it based on land mining and the actual dump? Is there another place that we can put that and build it anew and get exactly what we want? Does that cost more? Does it cost less? Is it the same? I think based on that, it's contiguous land that can be used as a landfill. To me, if it gives you more years, and then we have an ability to build something that's much more centrally located on the island. I mean, all that should be, it's probably going through your head. Or is that too much? Or is that too much to digest at once?
No, it's definitely a healthy question to ask. I would say, in my mind, the current ability exists for landfilling that would outlive the expected life of the yet-to-be-built building,
Yeah.
in my mind. We're talking decades and decades of space available, and with ability to expand currently, as opposed to then getting to the end of that and saying, now what?
Yeah.
And there's certainly lots of discussion about not necessarily the magic bullet, but additional or new technologies that could or would be able to handle things differently, which would further limit what we actually landfill.
Yeah. Because that could get more restrictive, or it could go the other way. It could open up.
More restrictive in what way?
Where you can't use the space you think you can. That may be from the regulatory
Well, I could
side.
guarantee you that things are only getting more restrictive regulatory
Yeah.
wise from all aspects, whether it's a wetland or environmentally, it's only getting more restrictive. So we definitely expect that to continue.
Yeah.
So along that line, Rep, what's the adversity the state has with taking waste out of an unlined waste out of the grounds and removing it as a potential hazard? Why are they? What is the issue with continuing mining from their point of view? I mean, if I understand this correctly, mining is we're removing waste that was put into the land, and there's nothing under it. That's the latest and greatest technology of a lined cell to prevent it from leaching or whatever concerns may occur with respect to the environment. So by mining it, we are in fact removing a hazard from the environment, correct?
So the bottom line is
Yeah.
the capping of the landfill prevents stormwater, prevents rain from further washing any contaminants into the environment.
And they see that as more beneficial than actually removing the potential contaminant from the ground?
In most cases, yes.
Huh, that's interesting. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure I understood. And then with respect to pricing and so on and so
To that, just to continue, where the mining here is most beneficial because of space considerations. We don't have
from a cost efficiency standpoint.
we don't have additional volume, or we're not making more land like China. So we're here as we run out of additional space. What are we going to do? We start to limit our options. By mining, we're essentially taking out beneficial material that was landfilled at one point, and it's largely sand that was used as daily cover So every time you'd bring in a day worth of trash, you'd cover it with available material, which was sand. And so years and years of this trash sand layer cake allows you to remove, now sort of that trash has now degraded over decades. So you've lost a lot of volume there, but what remains is that sand. So we've removed, and so what you're removing is largely sand and some glass. But the plastics and that sort of stuff that has not broken down and is going to take a lot longer to break down gets brought back to where it came from and put back in the landfill in that unlined cell.
When it's mined.
Correct. So this is that sort of 25% residual from the mining. We're recovering about 75% in the volume category. And so the town has benefited by creating space to build modern line cells.
Yeah.
You know, where we're building the line cells now used to be occupied by landfill.
Right, and we have additional 25% capacity based on what's degraded.
Not what's degraded. Basically, we're removing 70 to 75% of the volume when we mine, and that is being stockpiled for use to cap.
Okay, that's where I got
The
this.
25% that's unable to be recovered from the mining gets returned back to whence it came, back to the landfill.
Oh, okay. I thought you were, by that you meant it was being shipped off to be plastic
No.
or some type of recyclable or
No,
something.
right back where it came from.
Okay, so that's not a net increase of 25%.
That's right.
volume. Okay.
Yeah, so it's basically just, we're sort of, when we touch it, we hope that we are reducing the volume of that specific area by 75%.
Okay. And the reason I ask is obviously because, we want to understand, or at least the concept and costs related to the mining, related to the cell capping, and, be able to do some math in our own head, however simple it might be. With respect to dollar numbers, there's a big jump between 8.2 and then 10 and 14, and I
Sure.
appreciate the fact that you don't want to be projecting that yourself at this point and getting Weston and Sampson involved. But is that going to perhaps lead to a path of an alternate service provider for that, maybe a more reliable number? I just find a great deal of discomfort in the number going from 8.2 from our service provider to 14 million in a very short period of time, and it makes me wonder, do we have options in terms of service providers to be doing that portion of the work?
We absolutely have options. I mean,
Okay.
this is work that is required of the town with under an ACO administrative consent order by the regulator DEP. I'm guessing that our service provider is part of that equation, but that doesn't preclude us from
We're not
going
locked into
outside.
waste options.
No.
And I want to be sensitive to contract and all the rest of it. I know you guys got stuff going on. Other thoughts or questions for Rob on this? I guess the only question I have maybe if you could give us a more concrete in terms of mining is going to stop at some point, capping cells is going to start at some point. So we're carrying out your numbers for the mining. What's your best guess estimate as to when there will be a determination made? And I guess part of the reason I asked is because if it's not going to be an FY20, not to take away the placeholder for the capping of the cells, but why wouldn't we carry that out as an FY21 expense if it's more likely to be at the point that you think it actually is likely to be a FY21 or FY22 expense?
I totally agree. We would carry it out that far if we had definitive alternative to what we're currently permitted for. So until we have that answer, I would say conservatively carry it for 20.
Carry it because we may have, even though it may not be necessarily an FY20 expense, which I have a question for you on. It's the logistics. Okay, so under the state mandate, if it's a requirement as of FY20, we would want to have funding in place with respect to authorization and appropriation. How does that work, Brian, if that timeline is triggered and pursued, however, the expenditure doesn't begin to occur until FY '21 or something like that?
Which expenditure? The capping of the
For the
landfill?
capping,
It would be, correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, but it would be very quickly after June 30th, 2019 that we would have to start the process of capping the landfill. There's a very limited amount of, there's a time frame in the permit, correct?
So
For-
the
for
language,
capping?
the language talks about commencing.
Mm-hmm.
I do not believe there is very specific language on completion. I think what it does is it sort of keeps the door open for essentially understanding that in the best world scenario, you're gonna say, yeah, we can do this, and it recognizes the fact that construction is what it is. It's weather dependent, et cetera. And so while you may start, if there's either a reason to extend it out, to do it in specific stages, or it slips due to unforeseen conditions, that, you know, having a hard deadline to finish is probably unrealistic in most of these scenarios. So it does say immediately commence, but it does leave the door open for when that is actually completed. Most of the discussions we've had, assuming this is moving forward, is working with Waste Options now to ensure that the active mining that's occurring for fiscal 19 is done so in a way to begin sort of shaping the closure. So, you know, the discussions we've been having is, you know, is there the long-term beneficial reuse of that site being likely to be 10 megawatt solar field. So let's start looking at what that grading needs to be over that field, so that when we mine meaningfully, and we don't have to move, you know, continue to move material around.
Right, so some coordinated development for future planning or purposes.
Yep.
Okay.
But as far as,
But there's no decisions been made on this. You know, this
Sure,
is,
it's all-
it's clearly, sorry to cut you off there, but, you know, we're proceeding down that road with that idea in place, but it's not like we have a done deal with anything for future solar development at this point. It's largely conceptual.
but if we authorized the borrowing in 20 and it wasn't completed until 22 or whatever, it doesn't impact anything, because once the borrowing is authorized, we have the ability to utilize it until the project is done. And we close it out, and then we go back to town meeting, typically if we don't need all of the borrowing, and rescind the unused borrowing authorization. So it doesn't impact us if it's not done immediately. Once the borrowing is authorized, we have the ability to do the project for however long it would take. I did want to just point out that we kept mining and the closing in 20, probably from the rationale really was that we know that one or two of them are probably more than likely going to have to be, either one is going to be more than likely having to be undertaken, whether we convince DEP to allow us to continue a mining program, if it makes sense from a cost perspective to continue the mining, or if they say no, then at town meeting, we're going to have to be requesting an authorization to have the funds available to start to, as Rob said, to commence the requirements to cap the space. So they're both in there because one or the other will more than likely have to be put forth at the annual town meeting.
Okay.
You know, if there's indications from my perspective, and the town wants to continue to pursue mining, if there's indication that it's going to be successful to get a new extended application completed for however long it is, then of course we would just, you know, shift out the capping until whatever that extension may look like. But as of right now, since we do have a definitive idea that it ends on June 30th, 2019, we've chosen to leave them both in there because one or the other is more than likely what will happen.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Question, Brian, in the world of the Commonwealth, have any other communities gone an expense route of capping properties in lieu of capitalization? From a costing it instead of going through the capital program? Just curious.
I'm not sure, because I don't know exactly how many communities have landfills anymore, to be honest with you. I think it's very few. I mean,
Have we
used to-
looked at Yarmouth, for example, which is right across the way where they capped and then they've converted the property into something that does produce some semblance of revenue? I mean,
Which
you
is why I
mentioned,
think, I think Rob mentioned potentially solar. I mean, I think that's all part of the discussion, is if we don't extend landfill mining, what does capping look like?
Yeah.
And there's at least how many groups, 2 or 3 small committees working feverishly to try to sort through all of this, so that if capping is where we end up having to go, then of course, what is the outcome or utilization of that available? I know that Worcester, I think when they cap part of theirs, they put solar on it. Some have put fields, recreational fields on it after a certain period of time. So I think those are all things that we would certainly look at to find out what the best utilization is used for it.
so it sounds like you're going to have numbers both be added to the projections and numbers are going to be dropped for future years. And that sounds like it's right around the corner, which is good.
Yeah.
And I do like if we have land out there that we can't use for the purpose that it was meant for, then it would be great to get some semblance of monies.
Good stuff. Rob, you want to just hit quickly the other small items? Maybe
Sure.
You guys have had a chance to review them as opposed to having Rob walk through each of these if there's any particular questions.
I didn't see a form for the repairs, replacements in the sorting station. Am I missing that?
I think it's.
Sorting
That was in
station
fiscal
repairs
18,
is,
It's not 20.
Okay,
That was
Yep.
past tense.
okay, got it.
So I guess the only comment I have on those, and Rob actually doesn't relate to you so much other than just our general vision, I think, here at Capcom for the next several years, is that, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but these items, 50,000, 100,000, 50,000, 60,000, it's easier to say the numbers than list them out. Those were actually provided as requests in a previous year, but they're coded as FY '20. So if we look at it, if you guys happen to be looking at your page 1 of this one, there's a coding number. And what I'd like to suggest is that we would actually put those in as a 19 when they were submitted for FY '19. And Rob, the utility of that is we're, as a recommending body and trying to understand and review things, that number, by virtue of the fact that it actually has a year in it, gives us other information. For instance, we know
this has been hanging around for a
it's
while.
been hanging around.
Sure.
And we might, and then we'll know to go look at our notes. Whatever the purpose is, it gives
Yep.
us utility.
Sure.
So I would like to see if we could put those in. Going forward, my understanding is we'll actually see, there are certain requests that will be advanced for the current fiscal year by town admin. And then the ones that won't will actually be coded for the year they're submitted. And we'll be viewing them in a different report. So we can actually track that information separately.
Sure.
In terms of the actual costs and the scope of work, I have reviewed the SIP request forms. I personally don't have any questions about them, but if you guys do, I'd like to get those addressed.
The only thing I have, Rob, is a couple that are in the 50K range, overhead door and electrical, and I know it's existing, and it's just making a repair.
So particularly for instance, the overhead doors, we're finding the same on our own campus. We're likely moving forward with overhead door complete replacements. For instance, at our mechanics bay garage, we have essentially 4 large guillotines. There's no
Yeah.
safety release to pop back up.
Yeah.
A lot of those have track issues, so we're constantly trying to meddle with them to make sure they function properly. And the new ones have the features that have remote control,
Yeah.
much like a
Garage.
home garage. So it's substantially convenient as the driver approaches the garage, in inclement weather. And when you have a heated garage, in the middle of winter, being able to have a driver come in as they're coming in the driveway to activate the door to pull in and close it soon thereafter to maintain the heated space. There's a lot of efficiencies gained there. So those are largely, this is original gear that's being changed out.
So it's new?
It would be new.
And it's existing use, but it's new, and I would think you'd want to check it off as new because what you just said makes more sense than what's there. And then
I mean,
wouldn't
let's
have
put
a
it this
Yeah,
way.
point well taken.
We would not replace something that is functioning and working well. If it's mechanically sound, it'll stay in place and be retrofitted with other, let's say the tracks and the doors are working fine.
Yeah.
And we can add the sensitive strip on the bottom for the release and for the, and replace the motor control with the remote capability, then that's sort of a combination of
Yeah.
new
Okay.
and new and old.
So you're looking at it makes the 50, it makes the cut at 50, and it's got a useful life that will continue out to make it a cat. It's not just a repair, you're looking at.
Trying to
new or
extend
new
life.
improvement.
Yeah, I mean, one of the bigger discussions we're having with waste options is sort of and this is a different level of discussion, but it's having to do with facilities and capital, certainly, beyond the 2025 contract. And really now, as we approach the 2025 end of life contract, what happens to maintaining the equipment that is so essential to providing the service, right? I'm an operator. I'm out in 2025 unless there's something negotiated prior to that. So unless there's an incentive in my contract,
Yeah, it's all slack time, you just.
right? So we're having that discussion now to sort of look at and identify over these next years what major capital items beyond just the material recovery facility that we own would need to be maintained above what they would be doing it at approaching the end of the contract. So
So we're not walking into a derelict facility.
that's right.
Yeah, can I ask just a general question, maybe more operational? How much water quality testing do you do out at the landfill?
So
part of
yeah,
the
they're
daily-
mandated what's called the landfill water quality testing. There is another term for it, but it's mandated. We do gas and water testing, surface water and
Gas as methane or
groundwater.
gas as petroleum?
Gas as in methane.
Okay,
So there's gas and water testing that samples and testing that happens on a quarterly basis. All the reports are available on the DPW solid waste website. And since last summer, in working with the internal departments and some outside interests to sort of help us inform future determinations of with the water quality debate in Nantucket as to whether sewers are needed and/or specifically is the landfill a major contributor of nitrogen and other potential sources that are potentially impairing Long Pond and other water in Nantucket. We elected to add a regimen of nutrient testing to our, we started with 3 and then we're doing 6 this year, and we'll continue again at our cost to provide, to start to build that database to answer those questions as they continue to come up. So there is a pretty $125,000 contract that does water sampling and
so
testing.
contract to me means that we hire someone to do
Yes.
the samplings
CDM
and
Smith
then
is
to
our-
send them off island to
Yep.
be.
In
so-
addition to that, there's also sampling and testing going on by Waste Options
Yeah.
for compost, for instance, and they have electively done sampling and testing of their detention basins out there during the
So-
spring flood events they had.
There's a reason why I'm asking, because, and here's the reason. One would think that between yourself and David Gray at Sewer and Wanacom at its ability to test and need to test wells on a continuous basis, and I'm sure there's even other departments, whether it be in the watershed, for making or taking tests, that collectively, if we were to put together all the operating costs on what it cost us, the town, over an annual basis, and then we see in the capital coming down the road the need for a laboratory, that it could be much more inclusive of all of the needs of the town if we had a physical edifice, or you need obviously bodies to produce the results, that we could keep that here on island instead of continually sending samples off that sometimes are outdated by the time they get actually tested, or they may get lost. And I would love to think that, Brian, you have a handle on what the operating costs. I know this is capital budget, but it's coming down the road, and I know we'll get more bites at the apple. But I can tell you, as one person who has a FinCom hat on and a Capcom hat on, that to me, it may be time that we seriously think about creating a lab here on island that can handle all of that. And it's a question I'm going to have, for you, Brian, to look at everyone's operating budget. And if you're 125, and just for the hell of it, let's times it by 5, that's a pretty good big nut. That was just a guesstimate on an annual basis. And it may make sense to say, stop this foolishness. Let's build it. Let's bring in the equipment, and let's hire someone who can work for the town, not for individual departments, but would obviously work with all individuals. Enough said.
I think it's a point well taken. Not to be disagreeable, but I think I would prefer from the capital committee, and you've got 2 hats, so I get that. We're looking at owner project management costs that are in the millions of dollars annually, and will only escalate. So the simple point I would like to make is that if we are going to be devoting time to developing plans on what departments can handle what departments can handle what aspects of outsourcing that is to be more cost effective. Central capital asset management, funded by having some owner project management, even if it's very highly specific in order to be efficient in one category of work, say they only do building structure or something, but we're bringing that service in-house into a department, and that department is taking a lot of the capital paperwork pushing off the department head so they can be focusing on their work. I would just see that as a much bigger bang for our buck, in the sense that town admin and finance need to put time and thought into developing a solution. So a solution that would create that type of, the effort of the town admin and finance that would create that type of a solution versus the water quality testing. Well, water quality testing I think is very important. As I said, I think it's a point well taken. I think we would get a bigger bang for our buck. So I would just throw that out there in terms of priorities. That would be one that I would get behind. It's not a competition, it's just a thought, and I think they're all worthy of discussion. So, Rob, you got anything for us?
I would just very quickly add to Peter's discussion about laboratory development. And I've shared this with previous discussions about this. I'm not convinced that a town-owned laboratory would be a solution. I'm pretty sure, and this is something we'd have to double check on, I'm pretty sure results for public health need to be independent laboratories. But again, that's something that would have to be confirmed.
Okay. Peter?
Real quick, I'm sorry I didn't ask this before. With regards to the landfill access road and parking lot maintenance, is that primarily just repaving, or is there other aspects of redesigning?
Sure,
I mean, I know
good
there were
question.
some redesigns that just went into place, which I thought were great, kind of on the fly. I didn't know if this incorporated anything more than just paving, striping.
Sure. Very much on the fly.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I thought it was a great idea.
So it's sort of an idea that's been kicking around, but we felt the need, and we're glad that we're able to get it done collectively with our own in-house staff, our contractors, and with some assistance from Waste Options. But the intent would be to continue outside of the gate with that lane construction out to Nantucket Road, and then at the same time, ultimately repave, resurface the entirety
Entire parking lot.
of that whole area, and then continue to maintain it from there.
I think it'd be helpful to advance that one, Rob, if you could just, I know you got a lot going on, I get it, but if we could get some type of a GIS with an overlay showing the area to put in the packets.
Yeah, I didn't know if there were
Future
any
discussion.
supplemental documents with this,
No.
which is the only reason
No,
I
that's
asked, or if
why
I missed anything.
Well,
So
no, when you mentioned it, made me think, gee,
Yeah.
you know, it would be good to have a graphic because it would help us to understand. It would help other people looking at it to understand.
Absolutely.
$500,000 for what. All right. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time.
thank you, Rob.
Yeah, the floor, a picture of a floor drain in the collection tank really isn't gonna, that's not gonna help so much, but the roadway would. Guys, so we could do a, discussion, and I guess pick Brian's brain if we need to, and then do our, I'd like to suggest we just make open discussion and roll it into the, ranking of relative importance process. I realized this morning when I logged in that I was not able to actually enter information in my tablet in the cells. I don't know if you checked it. Did anyone, so we've got the Rory sheets.
When I sent it in Excel, everything seemed okay.
It worked.
But I can double check it and try to resend it.
Or we have the paper packets, right? So,
Paper, I know it's.
yeah, we can just fill it out if we have
everyone,
to.
But, I'll double check on the Excel when I go back and see what
Okay.
is going on with that.
Just a quick update. So are we, the process going forward, I don't know if I missed the meeting perhaps where we discussed it. So are we filling out Excel spreadsheets and then kind of like last year? Right? Is that what
No,
we did last
actually,
year?
this is,
Or we have
good question.
A different,
This is a
Portal.
stopgap measure until the database is, the Rory input form is completed. Brian has been working with the developer on that. I'm pushing, and I think Brian is pushing to get that. We were pushing for it for today's meeting. Unfortunately, that wasn't gonna happen, so we're looking at for September 6th and thereafter.
Is the 6th transportation, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we're pushing for the 6th. One of the things that the SIP request form is in beta, which we're inputting on making sure that everything's flowing correctly. Okay, and one of the things that we're doing in terms of that is we're pushing for this is that we're putting in manually all of the CIP request forms that are coming in so that when that goes live, they'll just automatically carry over. So most of the SIP request forms that we have are test forms right now. Simultaneously, they're they are creating and finalizing a Rory form so that when capital program committee members will log in, they'll be able to simply be on a landing page to start with, be able to pick the department, and it'll bring up all of the SIP request forms for the department. You'll be able to click on one and go to the Rory form. It'll take you right to the form, and you'll be able to do it as you're at the meeting. That's the very, I guess you can say, simple way to get this moving as fast as
Yeah, we
I think
gotta
the chair and I would like this to
Right,
move.
yeah.
Otherwise, the other way that we're doing this, which is multiple ways to access forms and view forms, is just it will take far too long to get it so
Yeah.
that you can actually use it right now. There is a way for them to upload all of the forms, but there's some snafus with some of the changes that we've made in being able to upload them. So we're going to just be manually inputting them as fast as we can to get them in.
As Brian and I were discussing, we're basically, unfortunately, because the capital process is an annual process, we're building a house and we're living in it. And Brian said actually it's more, including, remodeling the kitchen and eating in it. So we're doing the best we can with it, and we'll get there. Unfortunately, we're gonna limp through with the request forms, I think today in hard copy. And, it's our definite goal to not have to look at these things in paper again and to be using the database. So enough said about that, hopefully, but it's a good question, and, you know, what are we gonna be doing, how are we gonna
Great.
be doing it? Richard?
I have a question on the medium rated items, those 3 items from prior years, I guess. What's the sense of the committee on those? I mean, I for one think they should be done, but he only has them as medium.
You wanna identify which?
Oh, you're
From
talking.
from the
Yeah, from his
requests.
sheet, which
The
3?
electrical repairs, the
Yeah.
floor drain, and the
Yeah.
overhead doors. On the SIP form,
we
they're
use
all
those as
medium,
medium.
if I have that correct, I may
You
be
do.
wrong.
No, you're right.
How do we handle that? I mean, this is the kind of discussion that I hope we can have.
Well, I would expect that our committee can change it the way we want, the way we feel.
Or it's our impression of what it is. I mean,
Absolutely.
we can agree or disagree with what his prioritization is.
Yeah.
Because what he just said about the overhead doors as a
Sounds pretty
guillotine.
important, yeah.
Sounds high,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely sounded high to
Okay.
me. And then
Right.
like, so the electrical, my understanding, and that's why I didn't ask, Rob didn't provide a different perspective as an update. So as opposed to the garage doors, my understanding of the electrical was that it was incidental type things. It wasn't, there's shorts and
live wire.
live wires or things. It was just, well, this could be modified to make it a little more convenient, or that could be done in order for a future, you know, whatever it happened to be. And again, this is a remembrance of over a year ago, so. But I would suggest something like that would be more of a medium and perhaps would carry to an out year, whereas if you were comparing the two, and we were in a zero-sum game, and then the garage door, the overhead doors as a safety, would be something that would be a higher priority. But let's just go through each of them and come up with, how, you know, have the discussion, and then we can rank them.
Real quick, one more
Yeah, please.
just question on the form. Did we ever make a determination or a different determination on how we treat, say, low and medium for continuity A? If we choose high, if we have high as a 50, is low and medium each 100, or do we?
Yeah.
Is that how we're going forward?
And I hate to blame the database developer, but, so it's a two-part answer. The answer is yes. For the time being, what we decided was that if it's an operation high priority, then therefore it is also a medium and a low.
100% medium and low.
Yeah, what that doesn't address is what you were also talking about, Peter, which is something that, that just because it's high doesn't mean that the correlation between high, medium, and low is not necessarily the same correlation between required, recommended, and elective. So
Right.
the second part of the answer is that with respect to the database, we're also going to be putting into the Rory form another category or 3, correct, Brian?
We have talked about,
It's going to be risk,
internally, you and I have talked about, I think, 2 other categories, risk and
Funding
cost, or
effects.
funding effects, I think, were the 2 we've,
what we're going to do funding, I think it's funding sources.
I think it was funding sources. Was one funding, either funding effects or funding sources, but we have, I don't think we're gonna settle on both of them.
Okay, and then so,
If memory serves me correctly.
okay, so, and not to go down that rabbit hole, but the idea is that what will happen as we develop not only the graphic user interface of the database, so that you can get in there and you can do what you want to do with the Rory and look at SIP request forms and look at data in Excel format and so on and so forth. We're also going to be adding categories. One will be risk, one will be funding sources. The other will be that we'll create a subcategory differentiation between the high, medium, and low, and the required, recommended, and elective, so that when we sit down to do a group re-ranking using the analytical hierarchy process input format, everything will be taken into consideration at once. So as opposed to doing that in 2 steps, by differentiating out high, medium, and low, and required, recommended, elective, we're just gonna do it all at once.
Okay.
So that's why we're waiting. Okay, any other questions on the form itself, just as we're getting re-familiar? All right, so basically what it is, the criterion are listed in categories, and what you're simply adding is on a per project basis, the extent that you believe it's applicable on a 0 to 100% basis for each of the criterion. And we've got the facility access, road and parking lot maintenance, which I presume is not really any maintenance because it's a capital expense, but nonetheless. And if there's questions on how you want to proceed with that, as you're marking it, I guess we could discuss it that way. If somebody wants to discuss the projects in the form differently, please let me know. I just want to make sure we're,
In our mutual intent is to fill it out here and then turn it in.
yeah, label it, and we'll give it to Rebecca, and at the next meeting, we'll get the results,
Listen, yeah.
or by email.
Could you remind me on, just so I get back into this, so on B, the heritage and schedule replacement, if we don't think either one of those apply at all, it's 0, 0.
It's a 0, 0.
We don't have to, doesn't always have to equal.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be
Anything.
100% because it's, what we're utilizing here are the requirements laid out in the financial policies and procedures. Of course, we'll talk about these at a later date, and we can, as a group, say, well, we want to advance one project over another because of additional information or some other perceived value. But yeah, that can be a 0%.
Do we decide to go by 25, 50, 75 or 20, 40, 60, 80, or does it not matter? I mean, can you get as granular as you'd like with
You
the,
get as granular
okay.
as you want.
But I mean, for the sake of consistency between everybody, I mean, there's no requirement to stick by any,
I mean, it's an average of a ratio, so
Right.
it's so, I appreciate it, it makes sense, but, I don't,
Guess
there's not like a normalization required in
just I'm
terms of.
throwing that
doing
out there for,
Yeah.
you know, consistency's sake to,
No, I get it.
best not to get too
I think
creative.
if these were direct inputs, then maybe normalization of what the incremental number
Right.
was would make sense, but
Yeah.
we don't need to do that with this one.
So you got a question on the landfill closure capping.
Yep.
You guys might address this, and I just missed it. What's the difference between the 14 million on the sheet and the 8 million in the?
So the 8 million is what we're gonna go with. Rob, I think Rob was just broadcasting that there is potentially a larger increase, but the way he's going to determine before he makes a projection on that as realistic is the West, I think it was the Weston and Sampson.
Weston and
data.
Sampson actually was approved last night. They're gonna be doing the complete assessment of the capping cost.
Okay.
So
I
he'll,
wonder why would it be 8 and 8 or 14 and 14? You know what I mean? Why the difference?
oh, well, I think what he was saying is that he got a number for 8.2 and then from the same source more recently, but not with a big time difference, they changed it to 14.
Okay.
And he was
Missed
like,
that.
wait a
Okay.
minute. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gone up a couple times. It's gone to 10, then to
10 to
14.
14, yeah.
Okay.
So
So that's where the Weston and Sampson contract comes in.
I
is
missed
they're
that in the
gonna-
beginning.
Yeah, no, that's good. And while you guys are filling these out, if in the back of your mind you don't mind multitasking, think about how this will work when we're doing it on our tablets electronically. If there's something differently we might want to, we might do something a little bit differently to just be a little more efficient or effective. Because while it's in development, is the time to nail that.
Will it automatically update like the G Rory column and then the total below as you're putting them in?
Yeah, so I think what will happen is
Dynamically.
we've got to discuss it, but it'd either be like a save or submit button, and then you'll have.
And then
the
you'll have it and you
final.
can go back right there and
Yeah.
change stuff if you don't like the way that some
Right, so you can be
things
able to
panned out.
save it,
Yeah, I
Gotcha.
think it'll
And
it'll
then-
update on save, not.
But not like real time.
I don't think it will do it.
No.
I think we'll.
Yeah, they're
have-
not dynamic calculation
No,
fields,
okay.
but it will, you hit save, then you can check your work, and then you can hit submit, but if you want to, you can change it.
After you
Make
save it,
changes and
save
then
it,
save
change
it,
it,
yeah.
save it, change it, save it,
And
submit
it'll
it.
also show up on the landing sheet if it's saved as not complete. So you're not gonna have to go back through and look at all these things. So we're not gonna have to sit
Right.
here at a meeting and do these, I guess it's a good thing to point out. We'll be able to maybe go through, and if you wanna make notes, like if you have a specific aspect of the Rory for a particular project that you wanna not have to remember, you can just log in and enter it, and then hit save, and then come back and finish the rest later. So like if we're having a discussion, that might be a useful way to use it. So we're not having to sit here and do this as a group. Burning the
Midnight oil.
Fort Fairgrounds utility costs.
Okay. The money's coming from us. Good. That's why we don't tell you everything.
I don't want, that's why I didn't want to bring anything up. But I can tell you what my conversations I've had.
But
Doesn't make sense.
Then if that's answered, then it's my aspect. Because the first thing we do is decide something goes on.
I'm trying to figure out.
Even in the face there, there's certain things that David does that he can't do. It's gotta be, then, you know, what's wrong with, like I said, school punishment, instead of some kids, educated because they have special needs. Take that money in the highest and bring it here, and guess what, then the kids, it's not there, it doesn't do it. It's just very small, it's just because of us, man. We're not everyone. So what's wrong with us building something out of this and then charging the laboratory companies do it right here. You want this one? And you set up the contract.
So I went to, I was talking to you on other stuff.
Yeah.
And I took it all history real quick. And educated me for
Yeah.
last 10, 20 years, what they've been doing, 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to broker it to make it a priority within local to push. We got to do market law. Together, just trying to figure out, just interesting questions.
I think David and Romero are definitely on board. Should be. Because everything is going into the ground when it comes to the contract.
He's even offered, he said, maybe we can use this room in our space.
Phenomenal.
But it has to be separate. You can't simulate what difference each is. We can, because it's very, we can't be separate. Certain people, okay. 4 days a week will come from maybe. Since I think about housing, to people, to evaluate and do it right.
They did this. I think they could pull that.
To already know how it's
Do you think when they have this
going on Tuesday.
online, you think they could add these?
Oh, that'd be nice.
Elements of request point? Wouldn't that be nice, even to go back and flip through, because if you want like 50,000 or 5 minutes, 500,000, you know? It'd be a good idea.
Could you add that?
Can that pull from the SIP request forms and populate on that sheet when we are doing it electronically, so that we can see it without having to?
Which I'm sure you already know.
Yeah, you'll also be able to go and pull that.
Or
reference it to the system.
Right.
You'll be able to actually be able to go back directly to it to see anything else.
Anything else you want to, just at first, yeah,
And
I mean.
and the details.
Right. I mean, I know it's quicker than going through and, oh, was that 50 or 500? But, I mean, if it's something that's easy enough to program into it, so just at first glance, you're having, he has the dollar amounts and the
Oh,
departments.
on the top, yeah, you know what, it's
Up
funny,
here.
I was just gonna write those down
You
when I
know,
was doing this.
I mean,
yeah.
even if it's just one click, it's still,
perfect sense.
and if you're doing it on a tablet, it's not easy to move windows around and everything.
Yeah,
you
makes
know.
perfect sense.
So if it's easy enough to pull it from the dynamic SIP request forms and have it auto-populated in 2 new rows,
Nobody.
might
Yeah.
be something worth thinking about.
So at the top of the Rory, and where else did you say?
Just like that.
Just here at the
Maybe
top.
underneath
Yeah.
the descriptions.
See all the fun upgrades we're making?
And that, more to come.
I said, and the backup detail, and I saw him roll his eyes.
And the backup.
No, I
Yeah.
can do whatever. I mean, it's fine. We actually have, you know, there's a way for everybody to upload documents, which you guys would be able to go and pull when you're logged in to, as well, to see in the SIP request form. I mean, as I've told the chairman, I mean, the first 2 phases are get the SIP request form in, get it working, get it flowing, get the Rory done, and then get the other underlying ways to access all of the data
Right.
for everybody.
Yeah.
And then
Same thing.
phase 3 is kind of what I'm calling cleanup, and it's, let's go back through the first 2 phases, scrub
see
through all
what
the
we wanna
changes
do.
everybody wants and do this, because as I've said, this is a multi-step
And they're-
development, it is
And
not.
those 3 phases are really almost like a pre-developed, in the real world, where that's just the beginning of the
Working
phases,
out all the
so-
kinks.
Yeah.
Well, of all the different features that are gonna be put into it, there's a lot more utility that'll be built in.
And then we're gonna continue,
Reports and,
you know, we'll continue to build in other things, like, one of the things we're gonna do with, on the effect on operating budget is if people need personnel, they will be able to, you know, put in which labor union it relates to, what position type it
Number of
is,
people
and it'll automatically, and how many people in that position type, and it'll pull over the cost directly from labor contracts.
Nice.
We're building amortization tables into it so that we can do, and we'll update every year for the recap for the current tax rate, so we'll be able to do projected tax rate impacts as if it was in effect right now, because I can't project what
No,
assessed
going forward.
value is gonna happen over a long period of time, but
dangerous.
we can at least show what the impact would be today if it was on the tax rate, so that it'll help inform decisions. So there's a lot of notes and scribbles on napkins and everything on my desk of all the things that
I'm
we
so
want.
happy you have a whiteboard in your office.
I know, and a whiteboard still has what we talked about 2 weeks ago. So there's a lot of little notes about things that we want to actually add to it as we move and build.
So we have that to look forward to. Everyone's comfortable with their Rory complete status or good. Just got a couple quick things here. Has everyone met who's here met with their departments, liaisons? Is there anyone who hasn't?
We haven't met with sewer, right?
Sewer, yeah, that's right. Thank you for reminding me.
I have them for DPW.
DPW. And I think he got a buy on the honeymoon, just with everything going on right now. So I don't think we're gonna get, I think we might end up, I think with respect to transportation, we're gonna end up having to do something, but it'll be more after the fact cleanup to try and wrap up out any outstanding items. I have a feeling that was gonna be a little more involved than.
Well, we've gotten the majority of their request forms.
Okay, so,
We've gotten the majority of the SIP request forms. I haven't got all of the
backup.
backup
And the
to relate to
transportation,
them.
that's gonna be one of the more important ones,
Right.
at least out of the gate.
Yeah.
So
So that's
we
where
can-
we're at with that.
And then we'll talk about that at our meeting, is just backup details, and so everyone can have information and make, prepare in advance questions and make informed decisions and recommendation.
And we'll have a lot more information come after the special town meeting,
Yes,
where things are going with transportation or not.
yeah,
It's coming up soon.
it's gonna be interesting. Okay, so we've got that, and then I wanted to find out, along the lines of committees, but select board work groups. We've got the, our Ellen Home work group, that's a select board work group that, Richard's on. Nat is on the senior center work group. What other select board work groups exist that we're on? Peter, are you on the, you might be involved with our Ellen Home. Is that gonna be as a FinCom or as a CAPCOM?
I hope you're involved.
Yeah, I think it's on FinCom, I believe.
Okay, just so, I'm just trying to keep track and get an idea
Yeah.
of what we're in. And And then, is there another one? Is the DPW facility still active, or is that the work group for that?
Nothing I'm aware of.
No?
Yeah, I was on it. I don't know when
That's
the next
not
meeting
active at this
is.
point. Okay. So I have it in the background, and
Yeah.
that way, when I get an email like I got from Libby about the senior center work group, it just gives me a little bit more information.
Yep.
Okay, good.
We're supposed to have our island home meeting the week of September 19th.
Yeah,
Okay,
let's
great.
check that out.
And they're coming in not till a little bit later, I think. We moved them out. There will be one more change to the schedule. We were intended to do police, marine, slide, solid waste, transportation, and the what I'm calling DPW operations, which is basically everything else, out to give Rob and his crew a little bit more time that they needed so we could have information. It was good. He came in. He did solid waste. Police weren't able to be here this week, so they're going to come in. What did we decide? Well, you were going to check availability.
We gotta still, yeah, I'm just waiting, cause, well, the deputy is out, so we're
Right.
still waiting, we're gonna wait to try to figure out what his availability is for some of that,
But we anticipate they'll be here on the 20th.
yeah, we anticipate the 20th.
Okay. Okay. Good.
We should know, obviously when he gets back, probably pretty quickly after the 4th,
Okay.
whether the 20th works, but I don't anticipate any problems at this point.
Okay. Any comments, good of the order, directions, thoughts on what we should be doing different? Everything's good?
So, one question. So, the agenda that we got for this meeting is typically the crux of the details that we're going to get unless we ask additional details of the department head that's coming in for today in
Yes.
terms of the underlying details of the request.
Yes.
And now, this is the first one that we've reviewed this year, I believe, and this is the first one on the new form that we designed last year,
Yep.
right? I guess I feel like we used to get a higher level of detail in
Yes.
the request, a lot more, like we said, visuals for some things, more background on, like what's the purpose for a floor drain that we're constructing in the MRF, and so I don't know, maybe we'll see that in future ones. I'm not picking on Rob. This is just the first one that we've
No,
seen, and
it's a
you
good
know,
point, and
I don't
that's-
want to waste his time here for too long if it's something that could have been put in here that we could have reviewed a little bit deeper if there were more details.
Yes.
I don't know if you agree or disagree.
I
but-
agree completely, and that's one of the follow-ups. I just mentioned to Brian when we meet, we're gonna be talking about backup details, because although DPW has gotten a bit of a wave on
Right.
some of this stuff, it's not really gonna be appropriate, I think, for us and the integrity of our process to not have backup detail for certainly transportation. And then I think some of the DPW general stuff is carryover projects from last year, so we'll have details available there. But as a general matter, I believe we need to be seeing details of the project. And it needs to be, reasonably accurate and reasonably detailed. It doesn't, we need to know every dollar and cents, but we need to know better than an order of magnitude, and we need to know the source of it. And if there's some type of a supporting graphic or other information, I think it's important that we have it. Of course. Is that?
Absolutely.
I would think to a certain extent, 'cause if these are open to the public and the public's, trusting us that we know what we're talking about, but I mean, if somebody just picked this up and said, I don't have any
Yeah.
idea what this
Yeah.
actual request is for, and I'm not saying that they have to, write a book on every request, but somewhere kind of in the middle so that, the general person that might have an idea of, what an MRF is, or, why they might need $500,000 for, repaving and.
I will say relative to these, I know that there is more detail coming. I know that Rob has been meeting continuously with waste options, and these were the projects that they've discussed, or however they came to pass with him, but they are working on getting more detail and costing information. They just didn't have it right now. So there's also more detail that will come to you to have as backup for these as well. And it is something that we're stressing to departments, that we need to be able to have some of these underlying, pictures or cost basis and everything, so that and to also fill in here where there's areas and boxes to explain the project. So it's a constant review right now.
Certainly.
But there is the goal is obviously to give the committee every piece of information possible for you to be able to make your recommendations and get comfort level with the projects that are being proposed.
Right. Just wanted to point it out, being the first time that, we've even looked at our new form and what's being
So
presented
it's not
to
something
us.
that we haven't also talked about internally too.
I'm
so,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would be incredibly uncomfortable, and I think I can speak for all of us in that regard, that making a final recommendation without information, we need adequate information to be informed, so we can make informed recommendations. Peter, I think you bring up a really good point, and this is out of the gate. If this is what we're getting, this is gonna be a problem. So it's definitely not a level of detail. We can expect much more information. Along those lines, we are gonna have some outstanding items. I don't wanna let those go. I mean, they're in my mind, but I'd like to just recap for the benefit of the group. I think it's important that we just get a tear sheet on each of the requests, so we have some idea of what it is for our, our final review. And certainly the facility area, access road and parking lot, we're looking for graphic. And so that's the 20-002. And then for the 20-001, which is the capping of the cells, we're gonna be looking for, a large amount of data that explains what the cost is and what's involved in it. As it becomes available.
Especially, I was going to say, especially with that one, there'll be an ultimate. I think there's going to be some type of report on what would have to be done and the basis for the cost. So there would be something of it.
Right. But
much more detail.
just to have put out there that we're anticipating it.
And I've made notes about that, so we will certainly talk to the DPW director.
And then the other outstanding item, Brian, is can do you have any issues changing those to 19?
I will do whatever the committee would like in terms of that.
Well, I
If
just
that-
want to make sure operationally
That's
from
fine.
your standpoint,
Yep,
there's not an
I can
issue.
do that.
And I don't know that I believe capping of the cells was in the, no, I don't think that was in the report last year.
It has been. It's been carried for,
Capping 1A.
excuse me, at least the last 3 years, I believe, or 4 years, I think. So.
Okay, so if we could backdate that at least to a 19 project, that would be helpful. I have down the minor items. The fire alarm, the
So you're
floor
talking
drain,
about the electrical, the drain, the overhead, and the fire alarm?
drain collection, overhead doors, fire alarm. Yes.
Yeah, so we can go back and change those to the first year that they came up.
And,
Excuse me.
The facility road was a last year thing too,
Okay.
I believe. Oh, the one that wasn't on there, I meant to ask Rob about is radiation monitoring. Would you mind, if that needs to be a placeholder, we'd like to have that in there? Because it was a request last year, but it didn't advance to town admin recommendation for the fiscal year, but it didn't also make it to an out year.
Okay.
So I'd kind of like to know what that is. Okay, great. Christie, you want to make a motion to adjourn? How's your knee?
It's good.
Good?
Yeah, it's coming along.
Good,
Appreciate it.
good.
I did have a question.
Yeah, please.
So the percents that we're doing here,
Yep.
is this just sort of a first impression, or because if we're putting the scores down before we get actually all the information, then will they be? How are we going to rely on them? As far as, yeah, I like the fact that we can get them done soon, but
Right.
it's also, are we waiting for all the facts and all the information if we don't have it up front to be
No.
doing these?
The only one, to my mind, that we're really waiting for information on that's substantive, or I
Yep.
should say material, is the landfill closure.
Got it.
Capping.
All right.
The unlined landfill mining is a carry forward from years past that's basically a phased, year in and year out, so long as it's continuing based upon actual costs. The other items we reviewed with Rob, he had put them forward last year. We reviewed them with him to the extent we had questions, and he answered those. So those we were ready to proceed with.
Got it. Okay.
So the backup detail in this instance is more of we want to make sure we're
Financial
getting
recommendation.
something.
Yeah, I
So
gotcha.
that we are making decisions based on what we received
Mhm.
in real time versus having to go back and do it at a later date.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. In past years, they've talked about not recommending something if you don't have all the information or any information. In other words, if the department heads are just relying on the, meeting here, but maybe it's something to do.
Yeah, and last meeting, we actually talked about if I mean, one step further is, we need information. And if the request form's incomplete, if it's not complete with backup detail,
Yep.
it's not something we're gonna move forward. And if we don't have time to get to it because we're pressed on the tail end, because
Yeah.
we've got other FinCom and Board of Selectmen and the Finance Department schedule, where they need to be moving on to other things, then that's, I mean, I hate to say it, but that's how it works out.
Yeah.
You don't do your homework, you don't get the grade. So yeah, point's well taken. Any other thoughts? No? Good. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Excellent. Thank you all.
So next meeting is,
Transportation. Oh, I didn't announce it. Thursday, September 6th at 10:30 a.m. here.
Yeah, we handing these in.
Those-
Thank you very
And that's
much.
for you.
My name on it. Your name's on them.
Yeah, put your name on your glory.
Can I bring it to the office later?
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
okay.
You guys, if you
Yeah.
have time, you want to take
Yeah,
time,
no.
email it, drop it off, whatever.
So schedule will work on. Agenda we've got.